In this tutorial, we'll take a textured Blender file and turn it into a beautiful product rendered animation that you can use in your portfolio. The link to my Patreon where you can download the starting textured file is in the description. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and with that, let's get into it. Okay, let's get started with the animation of this design. Hopefully you've got this file downloaded. It's for free from my Patreon. You can go grab that link in the description. So once you open that up, this will be the file that you're met with. We've got everything arranged here in nice collections. I've got some turned off that we used throughout the process. I will turn on this lights, camera, action one. And then the first thing we're going to do is set up some of our rendered views so we can see what we're doing. So I'm going to drag out from this top right corner. Make one screen here, drag out to the bottom, and then we're going to use this as basically our camera view. I'm going to render this as a square, so I'm going to go to my render properties, or actually my output. I've already set this to 1920 by 1920, so that's the resolution that it should be when you open this up. And then basically we already have this camera set up. It's connected to this rig right here, which basically lets us control, the rotation and stuff like that instead of using the camera itself. So I'm going to go into camera view in this bottom right hand corner by hitting 0 on the numpad. And then I'm also going to set this to render. Just hold Z, go up. Yeah, so now you can see we've got the product in here. It looks nice. We got a completely black background. If you want to go into your film settings down here, you could go to the film and make this to be transparent, but we're going to use a background. So that's going to be the first thing we're going to set up first. So I'm going to go into the front view, and then I'm going to Shift A, add in a mesh plane. I'm going to tab in edit mode, RX by 90, and then I'm going to scale that up pretty big like that. And then what I'm going to do is GY to bring that back, and I'm going to bring it pretty far away. I don't really want that light to affect here. I'll show the light in a second, but I'm going to tab, scale it up, make sure that it covers this rendered edge. And then also in this view, I'm going to Control B, or no, make sure I'm not selecting anything, but Control B and select this. And then I'm also going to go over here and turn off these overlays. You can scroll in this thing if you didn't know that. So I'm going to turn off these overlays here. So now this is kind of just your background. So now it's still getting affected by this light, so I'm going to bring it back a little bit farther just so I don't see much on it. Tab in edit mode, scale it up, and then I'm going to give it some thickness. So I'm going to add a solidify modifier. So modifier tab, add modifier, and then just hit S for solidify. That way when I go in the top hand view, if I crank this up, I can see what this is. And now I want to add a light right in the middle, so I'm going to do Shift S, cursor just selected. That's going to put my 3D cursor there. Shift A, light, point, and then I just want to do GY to bring this forward. So now you can kind of see there's a little bit of a light here, and then I'm just going to crank this up. Let's try 1,000 to start. Even more, let's try 10,000. Great. So this gives us a very nice background, and then you can pull it out from the edge if you want to and continue to make that softer gradient. I'm going to do something like that, and let's crank this up to like 14,000. Sweet. Okay, yeah, this is basically the render view setup that we're going to do there. So now what we want to do is we want to give ourselves a nice angle. So what I want to do is I'm going to click on this camera empty that's in the middle of our scene and hit period on the numpad key. That's just going to zoom us back into here. So this just is going to be out here and making this background for us. But it is important, one thing that we want to do is we want this to always be in line with our camera. So I'm going to click this light here, and then our camera controller, and Control P, object keep transform. And that basically what that means is if I go here and I rotate this, we always have a nice background behind it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I want to kind of match the either the thumbnail, if I don't know if I put that for the thumbnail, but this render, we're basically going to make two of these. So I'm going to rotate this in the front view by 90, and then I want to kind of have a side or a angled view of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the camera empty here, and I'm just going to rotate it. Let's just do 15 degrees. And then I also kind of want to be looking up at this thing, but instead of doing this, we could just do RXX. But what you'll see is basically you're going to get distortion. You can tell how the bottom here looks bigger than the top. So we're going to use a different technique. So I'm going to do Control Z and put it back to just that 15 degree. If you go to your camera and then go here, there's this Shift Y. I'm going to crank this all the way up. And basically what that's going to do is that's going to give us an upward view of 2, whatever this angle is, shift, vertical camera shift, but it's not going to give us any distortion. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab both of these, go into camera view, and then basically if I scroll back, I can see they're down here. I'm going to GZ to bring that up till that's right in the middle. Grab my light here, do GZ to just put it right in the center. And then actually I'm going to do Control Z. It looks like pretty close in the camera view, so GZ, bring it down. like that. And then all I'm going to do now is just grab our camera empty and then do GZ and bring it down until I can see our product. And that right there, you can already tell it makes so much nicer of a view here. And then you can kind of tell if you don't want that much of a downward angle, you can go back and change it. But for me, this looks pretty good. So then I can just do GZ and kind of center the object the way that we want it to in the frame. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is I want to have two of these. So I'm going to click this controller here. I'm going to right click it and do E, select hierarchy. And then basically I'm going to do Shift D. I'm going to duplicate the whole thing. It's going to take a second because there's a lot of meshes, but I'm going to hit Y and just constrain it to moving it this direction. I'm going to go into the front view. I'm going to rotate it. Ooh, make sure you don't do everything else. It's going to go absolutely crazy. It kind of looks cool in that rendered view, but just grab the controller, go in the front view, rotate it. I'm going to do 180 degrees. Now we got that rotated 180 degrees. I'm just going to do GZ to bring it up, something like this. And then I kind of have it hidden behind right now, so I'm going to go in the front view and this GX, kind of bring this over, something like that. And I kind of want this shadow to touch, so I'm going to do GY and just bring that back, something like that. Now you can basically see that we don't have really good framing in our view right now, so I'm just going to grab this camera empty. And I know it's kind of weird that it's not in the middle, but technically if we wanted to, we could Shift A and then add in an empty cube. Actually, it came out way out here. Let's just delete that and then Shift C. That's going to recenter the cursor. We could do Shift A and then add in an empty. Let's just make it this sphere just for fun and scale it up. And then what we could do is we could just grab this, parent to this, Control P, Object Keep Transform. And then now we could even just like hide this. And then all we got to do now is if we want to rotate our camera around, we could rotate it in this point of view, which is pretty nice. So I'm going to use this because now I can go into the camera view and then I can just hit G while holding this to center up our camera here. So bam. Now, the rest of this is really going to come down to lighting. We're going to go down a couple rabbit holes on some techniques that you can use to get some better lighting. So the first thing that I want to do is for this one right here, I want to decrease the spread. Basically, if you haven't used spread before, what it does is instead of this putting out light, I don't know if I can use the little draw thing. Yeah, I should be able to. Instead of light coming out in 180 degrees like this, so you can tell that this is half of a circle, it's a bad drawing. Instead of that happening, I'm going to erase all this. Instead of that happening, as you decrease your spread, instead of being all the way out here, this light's going to get pulled in more and more like a spotlight. And what that does is sometimes it just really helps you to have some nice fall off because you can adjust the blend on the light also, and that's going to let you kind of create a little bit of a nice gradient fall off. So we're going to use that in our scene here. So I'm going to go back to box select, and then while this light's selected, I'm just going to bring the spread down. So now you can see at the very top you got this nice light fall off here. And the other thing I want to do is this, I really want this to kind of be a key light, and this is relatively small and relatively close. So I'm going to do GZZ and just bring this back. Then we're going to make this size to be at least 10. That's going to give us softer shadows. And now what I want to do is I want to kind of bring the spread all the way down and then just see if we can find that line like that. And then what I'm going to do is I actually kind of want the gradient fall off to be in this bottom corner. So I'm going to do GZ and just bring this up and then GX to bring it over. And then what I'm going to do now is increase the spread or something like that. Yeah, and basically what that's doing is you can already see that that just makes this product seem so much more real. Also, this is another thing. I don't like the black centers of these. I'm going to go to the shader editor, and then I believe it's this one. Yeah, I'm going to crank that metallic up and the roughness down. I just want them to appear a little bit darker, like that. Okay. So now this shade here is looking really good. As a matter of fact, we might even do the same thing and increase this to like 15. That's going to lose our thing there. So let's just put it back to 0, then GZ to bring it up. Find that point. The other thing I want to do is I kind of want to do GY and bring this forward. GY. And then now let's add our spread back in. Something like that. Very nice. Yeah, so this is a good key light for our product. I think I can increase this power to like 1500 maybe. Let's try 2500. Don't forget our trick that we showed in some previous videos. I'm going to pull this up so now we can kind of focus on how this looks. Also, I'm rendering in cycles. If your computer doesn't update as fast, depending on your specs, you can use Eevee, but I'm not an Eevee expert, so I'm going to stick to cycles. But now this is looking pretty good, but the one thing that we're seeing is on this side here, we basically have a completely sharp black, and on the bottom, because we only really have one light, we're going to try to keep this lighting setup simple. So what I want to do is I'm just going to go in the front view, Shift A, light area. I'm going to rotate this by 90 this direction. I'm going to go to the top view. Basically I want to use this as kind of like a rim light. I'm just going to shine this at the back here. Let's take our light setting. Let's make this like a 5-meter size and GZ to bring it up. And now let's crank up this light. So now we can see it coming on this back side. Already this product was looking really nice. But I want to do the same thing as we did before. I want to really crank down this spread. And then if we move this in the GZ, you can see where that fall off is right there. I just basically want to bring it down and then increase that spread just till it hits the bottom. So you've got a little bit of brightness here and then coming down. That looks good. This is kind of bright. I think we could do like 50. Give us a nice highlight there. Yeah, this is looking good. So now let's look at some other areas. The same thing I would say on the bottom. So let's just duplicate this light. So technically this is kind of a 3-point lighting setup. So I'm going to do Shift D and then I'm just going to Alt R to reset the rotation. In the front view, holding the tilde and just drag over to the front. I use that all the time. I'm going to put this here. And basically what we want to do is want to match the fact that it's dark in this corner. So already we kind of have this going on. If I put this right below, it's equally lighted, excuse me. And then if you do here, you have a little bit of a nice fall off. So already this is looking great. The one thing I would say is that this shadow seems a bit sharp here. So we could try a couple things. One thing we can try doing is just Shift A, add in a new light area, go into the right hand view, and let's just bring it to the front of our objects like this and just scale it up. Or no, not the power. Let's scale up the size. Basically make this kind of like a softbox. This is going to give us less contrast, but you could kind of hide some of this sharp shadow. We could do like that. Let's try just increasing this. I actually don't like that. I don't mind the sharp shadow there. We could keep playing with making this bigger, but you're basically just going to want to get down to having that, having these shadows look the way you want them. This right here looks really good to me. It sets the product off well. You could animate this screen texture. That would be really cool. Now, the one thing I will say is that this is a reflective material here. It's basically glass, so we go to our glass shader. I don't know why I have a little bit of metallic. You can kind of play with metallic and roughness to get the answer you want. But one thing that I want to go over is light linking. If you haven't used this in your Blender scenes, it's a great tool. So basically what I want to do is I want to add one more light, Shift A, light area, and then GZ, bring it up. I want there to be some light reflection to show that this is a glass panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do GY, I'm going to bring it back, GX, bring it over. And then what I want to do is I want to scale it in the X direction really far and then just scale it down. I just want to kind of make an angle here, so I'm just going to rotate this with RR, just trackball rotate it. And then maybe just R, bring it over, something like this, scale it down. Or let's just do SXX, scale in its local X, scale it down some more, rotate it, something like that. Nice. And now you can adjust the power if you want to make this like just 2 watts, just enough to have a highlight here. That's just going to show your audience that that is a reflective panel. You bring that roughness all the way down, you get something kind of unrealistic, so I would definitely make sure you include a little bit of roughness, and then you can play with your metallic however much you want. I think it looks good sometimes to increase this metallic and then give this a little bit of sheen here. But the one thing that we will say is if you wanted to, if we turned off all the other lights, if we turned off this light, we could see that this light might have a factor or like that it's affecting this. So one thing I want to teach you to do real quick is let's grab this light, go into the object settings, go to visibility, no, to shading, light linking, and then click new. Basically what it's going to do is we're going to say this light should only affect this object. So I'm going to click this object, hover over here, hit period, and then now this glass piece is what it's called. So I'm going to go back to the light, and basically what we do is we take this glass piece and just drag it into here. And now we could take this light, for example, and we can make it incredibly bright. And it's not going to affect anything else in our scene. I can bring this light right up in front of the whole keyboard and it'll never mess it up. So now we just have super nice control over how we want our screen reflections to be. If you want this to be a super bright light, you want to bring it down, you can use that, because if we left this at, let's say, 500, and then we scale this light down, something small, like that. However you want to make your thing go, you could not always be sure that that would not blow your image out. So I'm just going to put it back to something like 10. Nice. And then we could, if you want to, you could go back, set the same thing up for back here. And then now it would just come down to setting up the way that you want your lighting to look. If you wanted to animate this, we can make a super simple animation. As a matter of fact, let's just do it. Let's go into solid view. You're going to see that these planes show up here. That's just because we set up an alpha texture on them, so they show up in their solid view but not in the rendered. So what we're going to do is let's just grab both of these empties. It looks like I have a keyframe on them from something, so I'm just going to do A in this area, X, and delete them. And then I'm going to go, let's make this a 4-second animation. Let's do 5 seconds. I have mine set to be 30 frames a second here. So 5 times 30 is 150. So let's just set our end to 150 and then go back to 75, which is the middle. So basically this is where I want it to end. So I'm going to give both of these a keyframe here, location and rotation. And then all I got to do now is go back to the beginning, frame 0. If I want to bring this down almost out of frame, bring this up, GZ out of frame, and then grab them both, shift select, insert, location, rotation, and then basically I want them to go back to this. So I'm going to just, while they're both selected, box select over this keyframe, shift D and X, bring it to 150, and now you just made a looping animation, because this point right here will go to here and then back to here, and then it will start over again. So one thing I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and save your file. So I'm going to save as tutorial render, just so I don't lose it. You want to always do this before letting objects move in your scene, but we're in solid view, so it should work fine. So now you got your pieces coming in and coming back. One thing I will say is if you grab both of them, we could bring down here, go into our editor, and then what I would probably do is we're basically only using the X or the Z location. So if you do Z, actually let's just get rid of this. Let's open up both of these menus and let's get rid of everything but the Z location. So show Z location, and then show the Z location. What I would do is I would grab both of these and I would scale them in the X, and then I would grab each of these points here and S and the X and bring them back. And basically what we're going to have here is that now your thing is going to start slow, kind of snap into position, and then come back. And if you want them to wait, let's just do this. Let's grab this one, Shift D and X, or just GX, excuse me, move it here. And let's do Shift DX and bring it to 10 frames over. So now there's a 10 frame pause. So now you come back there. Nice. This animation looks really nice now. One thing I would do to kind of give it a little bit more variability was I would go to the middle point on your camera rotation. I'd insert a location and rotation. Go back to 0, just rotate it a little bit in this direction, insert location and rotation, go to the very end. All we want to do is Shift D and then X to move it along, put it here. So now you just got a little bit more dynamic movement in your thing. It's not much, but you'll notice it in the rendered view. So now we go into rendered. You can see here, I'll scrub over it. You got this super nice animation. You can add it to your portfolio. I don't have enough time in this type of video to really like animate these chords and make them do something different. It would be really cool if it was like a zero gravity situation and the chords were animated, and like as the keyboard came down, it would show you how to like, you know, that the chords were moving or floating in space. But overall, this is a very good looking render. You could then, you know, if you want to change your background, we could add a material to your background. If you want the background to be darker or something like this, you could do like a black. You could get rid of this altogether, render it out as a transparent, and you could use it to do whatever. You could add a color. A lot of times a very subtle pale color looks really good with stuff like this. So I like this blue. If you did over here, you could like change your hue and just go around the circle, find something that you like. Kind of like a pastel type color. I really like this blue or green. It's very tech looking. It complements your orange, so that's one reason it's going to look good in the scene. So that is the end of this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown of some lighting, some animation techniques. You can now render this out. I'll go over my render settings real quick. Typically, I will render them out in video format if I'm not worried about it crashing. So if you go to your output here, if you go to your output here and then you go set up a folder, you could do it. I usually leave mine to PNG if it's kind of a complex scene. And then if you do it as a video, the best way to do it is do FMPEG video, and then in your encoding, set it to MPEG 4. And then you can either set this to something different, but H.264 works. You can set your speed or your output quality. The other thing that you can do is you could go to your color management here. So go here, color management. And then if you want to change this look to something like a high contrast or a medium high contrast, that can make this look really nice also. But okay, that is basically how I would render out this thing. You could set up your file output and send it to render. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. We've got more coming soon. If you did, consider dropping a like, and we will see you in the next tutorial.